In a vibrant medieval fantasy world, brilliant young inventor Barney had just finished another marvelous invention meant to make everyone's life much easier. His older siblings were Cliff and Lucille. People immediately praised his great abilities, saying he had become famous across the city and that everyone was grateful for his inventions because they had made daily life much easier. His sister hugged him tightly before his parents arrived, and they proudly called Barney their ultimate pride and joy. After earning exceptional skills as a magical engineer, Barney quietly vowed to protect the country he loved and his family. It began in the modern era with a tired, unambitious man who had finally hit rock bottom, completely worn out by his relentless daily work routine, and each morning his annoying alarm woke him. Pushed through the suffocating crowds on the packed train, he trudged on to his office. His boss always scolded him and barked orders to finish endless work, often forcing him to stay late past the official closing time. He felt he had no choice but to follow his boss's orders. On that fateful day, he finally finished his task well past midnight. Rushing to the railway station, he was desperate not to miss the last train, but as he sprinted up the stairs, a sudden, overwhelming wave of dizziness swept over him. He plunged down. The impact severely damaged his head. He lay motionless, and his consciousness began to fade as a chilling thought crossed his mind that he was dying right then. Suddenly, an image from his childhood flooded his mind, and he wondered if it was a flashback before death. Orphaned soon after his parents tragically died, he was cared for by the kind people at the orphanage. An insatiable loneliness from having no family kept growing inside him. After graduating high school, he felt utterly empty, was exploited by an abusive company, and saw his life as utterly unworthy, and questioned the meaning of his life as he fought to move. Tears streamed down his face as he sincerely wished that in another life he would be born into a family filled with boundless love. All he wanted was to truly love someone and to value himself, and as his consciousness began to fade into total darkness, a strange, very soft woman's voice gently said the unfamiliar name Barney. He opened his eyes slowly and saw a kind woman apologizing for waking him and gently saying it was time for his milk. Not realizing he had been reborn as a baby, he wondered to himself about the confusing situation. At that moment, Scott arrived and made Barney even more confused about the milk. At first, he thought he was in a hospital, then he was stunned to realize he couldn't make a sound. He still couldn't understand how Dorothy could carry someone his size so easily. Taking the milk bottle and gently putting it in his mouth, Scott realized he had become a kid. Sucking on the bottle, he kept wondering how he could still be alive after that devastating accident, and glancing around, found himself in a house he'd never seen before. This felt less like a foreign country and more like a fantastical world from a storybook. He realized he had died and ended up as a baby in an unfamiliar place, which could only mean he had truly been reborn into a new place. Looking at Scott and Dorothy, he realized they had become his new parents. At that moment, Warnie's siblings arrived with their faces beaming. She enthusiastically showed them a beautiful golden flower that perfectly matched Barney's hair. Lucille said she found it at a food stall, while Cliff proudly said they pooled their allowances and bought the exquisite flower as a special gift for Barney. Barney knew at once they were his older siblings. Lucille gently handed him the flower. She confidently used her blessing magic, releasing a swarm of glittering butterflies that fluttered gracefully around Barney, leaving him stunned and completely mesmerized by the enchanting display. She wished him a bright future and much happiness. He was completely taken aback, and Dorothy praised Lucille for already using blessing magic at such a young age, while Lucille confidently replied that she had worked very hard to learn that spell for her precious baby brother. With his sister getting all the attention, Cliff quickly said he wanted to show Barney his cool side, his impressive swordsmanship. Unable to wheel the sword into the house, Cliff promised Barney he would demonstrate his swordsmanship the next day, reassuring him that he was fully capable of protecting his little brother from any danger. At that moment, Lucille rushed in and said she would protect Barney with her magic, but they began to bicker. Scott stepped in and gently patted both their heads, saying they were already more than capable of protecting him as his devoted older siblings. Cliff said mockingly he'd always been like a big brother to Lucille, and she pointed out he should accept that praise humbly in times like these. Dorothy then asked them to help with dinner, and as Barney watches the sweet, loving exchange between them, at last he realized what a truly happy family looks like. The next day, as the family rode in their carriage, he realized he was no longer alone. Barney was captivated by the magical world's scenery, and that afternoon they were heading to the Grand Cathedral in the royal capital to have their job skills assessed. Scott was a respected silversmith who ran a workshop in the royal capital, so they decided to stop by his workshop first and then go to the cathedral together. Soon after, Cliff practiced diligently with his sword, easily cutting into the thick bark of a large tree with swift, precise strikes. Barney watched, gave Scott a puzzled look, and Scott's father explained it was just Cliff's regular training. Cliff was a natural with a sword, and he dreamed of becoming a renowned adventurer who explored dangerous dungeons around the world. He mentioned a strange rock he'd set aside because he thought it might be useful later, and had promised Cliff an introduction to a seasoned adventurer if Cliff could break it with his replica sword. He added that Lucille had a natural aptitude for being a magician and an immense, undeniable talent for magic. Barney was amazed to learn about his siblings' natural talents and impressive abilities. It occurred to him there would be no successor to Scott's workshop because Scott was a specialist silver craftsman, and Scott proudly told him he had made Cliff's own replica sword. Barney immediately pointed to the workshop. Scott apologized for not letting him go further and explained the workshop contained a lot of dangerous equipment and intricate tools. Barney looked disappointed. Scott patted him on the head and said he would consider it a special favor if he showed skill in craftsmanship at the upcoming appraisal ceremony. Ultimately, he wanted his children to follow their own paths if they could truly live the life they most desired. At that moment, Dorothy asked him for help. Barney wondered what jobs and special abilities he would have after the appraisal ceremony. From the blue cliffs came the suddenly broken half of the precious sword. Tears immediately ran down his face as he said in a quivering voice that his father had gone to great lengths to make the sword just for him. Seeing him cry, Barney panicked and considered trying to repair the sword, even though he had shown no powers yet. At that instant, a transparent screen appeared in front of them as if by a miracle. The screen showed item lists and required materials, and Barney couldn't make sense of its purpose, but it looked like he could make a selection much like in a game. The screen showed the Unlock and Rebirth benefits menu, with one-time enhance and repair options available as part of his Rebirth perks. Still, Barney was genuinely confused. He understood that this could happen in a world where magic existed. He then carefully checked the exact materials he needed to use this mysterious magic effectively. This repair required repair material and magma ore, but Barney didn't have immediate access to the magma ore. With urgency, Barney scanned the area and saw his brother's necklace glowing faintly. With no time to hesitate, Barney flailed his tiny arms and squeaked loudly, desperately trying to grab the attention of the apparently oblivious Cliff as Cliff approached him. Smiling gently, he apologized for showing such a tearful, awful side of himself, since his brother couldn't see the mysterious light. Barney became even more convinced that he probably had some kind of extraordinary power. Without hesitation, Barney yanked the necklace and pulled Cliff toward him. As Cliff stumbled forward, Barney reached with his small hand for the broken sword. The sword floated in midair at once, bathed in a magical glow, for the family who had given him such overflowing, unconditional love. Barney would give everything for them if there was anything he could do. Moments later, the sword returned to its original pristine state, leaving Cliff completely stunned. Stunned by his little brother's skill, he froze the moment his brother's sword grazed him. Cliff realized it was even more refined and perfectly balanced than before, and without hesitation, he held his stance and swung his sword with immense power. The strike split the sturdy rock into pieces, leaving Cliff and Barney completely speechless at the display of power. Cliff was clearly delighted to have finally broken the stubborn rock and sincerely thanked Barney for his quick help. When they heard the loud thud from the powerful impact, Scott and Dorothy rushed to the scene and were stunned to see the rock shattered. Excited, Cliff told them that Barney had miraculously repaired his sword and used it to break the rock, while Scott carefully examined it. He turned to Barney with a confused look, as Barney still could not fully believe the extent of his powers. Relief flooded Scott when he saw his sons were unharmed, but he still eyed the Cliffs with suspicion. He asked him to break the rock again, because he couldn't believe he'd pulled off such a powerful move by himself. Shortly after they arrived at the cathedral and paid their respects to the pastor, he gently lifted Barney, playfully calling him the star of the show. This world had basic concepts called jobs that marked which profession suited a person and allowed them to use specialized skills for that role. With a hidden ability, someone could qualify for a rare specialist profession through tailored training. Soon after birth, everyone underwent a crucial appraisal ritual to learn their destined jobs. After that, the pastor led them into a quiet room where a single polished crystal ball rested on a pedestal. The pastor wondered aloud what job Barney would end up with, since his older brother was a promising swordsman and his older sister was a great mage. Carefully taking Barney's tiny hand, he pressed it gently against the crystal ball. It displayed the exact same status screen that had appeared for Barney earlier. Astonished, the pastor witnessed the crystal's overwhelming, brilliant glow. They immediately told everyone about Barney's extraordinary profession. He designed magical devices. The pastor had never seen such a rare profession in all his years of service, and he noted with interest that it was in the same field as Scott's, with Barney now more than qualified to take over the workshop. Smiling warmly, Scott said Barney should decide his own future, and as his father, he was happy to respect and support whatever path his son chose. Everyone in his family was thrilled too. Their faces lit up when they heard his calm, loving words, and Scott gently drew him into his arms. Barney realized he had been given a rare chance to live with a warm, loving family. Now he would do anything to protect the happiness he'd found with his cherished family. Determination shone in his eyes as he vowed to become a respected magical tool engineer in this new world and to grow undeniably strong for his beloved family. On a bright, sunny day with a brilliant blue sky, Barney was watching Cliff practice with his sword, and Cliff's swordsmanship had clearly improved. A year had passed since his appraisal ritual, and his big brother had been practicing swordsmanship relentlessly. After Cliff split a rock with an ordinary replica sword, Scott arranged for Cliff to meet an adventurer. Barney still showed no understanding of being a magical tool engineer. Given the chance to test his abilities, he feared his family would not allow such experiments. Watching his brother train relentlessly, Barney decided to push his thoughts aside. Enjoy the day instead, since it was important for his family. While everyone rode in the carriage, Scott noted that Lucille's academy enrollment was coming up. Dorothy suggested they have a picnic before that happened. This year Lucille turns 7. Because she was a great mage, she was excused from the Royal Academy entrance exam, and her enrollment was scheduled to begin 1 week later. At first Lucille was also looking forward to it, but she was clearly heartbroken about leaving her family. Because the academy was a boarding school, she could only see her family during long vacations, and her loneliness was inevitable. Cliff ruffled her hair playfully to lift her mood and told her not to look so sad, assuring her that school would definitely be fun. Soon they reached a beautiful spot by a lake surrounded by lush trees. That day Barney had a secret plan and set out to make many special memories with his sister Lucille. They stood stunned when they came across such a beautiful spot. Scott revealed it was a hidden gem he had discovered as an adventurer, not far from the royal capital. He said monsters didn't appear there because of the royal magic core barrier. Smarter, higher-ranking monsters could sometimes break through it, but they generally avoided the area because it was close to human settlements. Hearing that, Barney wondered if Scott had been an adventurer before, and despite the clear danger from the constant threat of powerful dungeons and monsters, he felt overwhelmingly curious. Scott gently suggested that Dorothy give a protective charm to Barney and one to Cliff, since Cliff's magical enchantment seemed to have run out. Dorothy gently placed a delicate necklace around Barney's neck, and he noticed the charm matched the one he had used back then to mend a broken sword. Scott said it was a simple protective charm made from magical aura, but added they might end up using it for something else entirely. After their brief warm conversation, he took a leisurely walk around the lake with his beloved family. While exploring, they enjoyed precious family time, bonding deeply as they encountered a variety of local wildlife and made beautiful flower garlands. They even tried fishing around the lake. When Lucille's fishing line suddenly started tugging with force, everyone grabbed the sturdy rod. Together they hauled in a massive catch. Soon after, a delicious fish dish was served to them. Lucille revealed she wished Barney could also eat the savory dish she had personally caught. Cliff immediately stepped in and proudly said they only managed to catch such a massive fish because they had the much-needed support. But she insisted she had reeled it in herself. Barney realized this wasn't the time to zone out and that it was the perfect moment to try to speak, and his face immediately lit with delight as he spoke in a squeaky, determined voice. Struggling to get the words out, he called Lucille and said he admired her. Barney felt genuinely proud that he managed to say the few words he had practiced. Overwhelmed by her baby brothers, Lucille received unexpected appreciation. Dorothy Urite smiled warmly and said Lucille was very lucky to be called a big sister by her adorable brother. From that moment, Barney wanted to build a lifetime of cherished memories with his family and hoped they would grow every day. After they finished their pleasant lunch, Cliff asked his father Scott for permission to stroll around the area with Lucille and Barney, and Scott told them not to go too far from their picnic spot. After a while, they explored deeper under the forest's dense canopy. Lucille asked Cliff about the person their father had promised to introduce to him. Cliff said the law only allowed them to join the Adventurers Guild at 13, and since he was still 9, he was only an apprentice to that person, so dungeon explorations and grand adventures were still a long way off for him. He warned Lucille that dungeons were not places to enter casually. Not all dungeons had protective barriers and designated safe areas like the one they were now entering. Still confused by his statement, she said he would inevitably have to go to such dangerous places once he became a full-fledged adventurer. He casually revealed he had a dream he wanted to fulfill. But when she pressed further, he suggested they wrap up the conversation for now and go back to their parents. At that moment, Arnie heard a strange rustling in the dense bushes. Trying to inspect further, he asked Cliff to check that area. Cliff bravely pushed aside the concealing bushes to see what was hidden. Startled, they found a massive white wolf lying before them. Stunned by its size and strange appearance, Barney wondered if it was a monster. Ordinary wolves weren't supposed to be that big. Without hesitation, Cliff told Lucille to hide behind him with Barney, and she answered quickly, her voice trembling with fear that he could not seriously intend to fight that monster alone. He told her he would distract it and draw its attention to himself while they ran back to their parents to warn them about the danger, and even though he looked brave, his fear and trembling were obvious. Barney wondered whether there was another way to save everyone from that fierce monster. But the wolf slowly stood up and took a few trembling steps toward them. The wolf abruptly turned its head and averted its piercing gaze. When it broke eye contact, Barney thought it might not be hostile, but he quickly realized it looked like it was suffering, possibly in pain. Still protective, Cliff ordered Lucille to take Barney and run, but she refused to leave him behind. Barney thought there was a strong chance the wolf wasn't an ordinary monster. Remembering his father's earlier words about higher-ranking intelligent monsters, he thought it over. If the wolf was truly an intelligent, superior being, it made sense they were inside the barrier-protected area, and they might be able to communicate with it. Suddenly, Barney's charm glowed softly, and the familiar transparent screen appeared in front of him, making him realize it was the same situation as before. Now he was certain they could get through this safely. Wasting no time, he grabbed his glowing charm and his scarf and channeled his magical power into it. Then he carefully handed the newly enchanted scarf to Cliff. They motioned for him to put it on the massive white wolf. Lucille was understandably wary of the danger, but Cliff trusted his younger brother's instincts. Since the formidable monster wasn't attacking them either, they cautiously approached the creature. Approaching the wolf slowly, he apologized for pointing his sword too quickly and promised they would not hurt it if it did not attack. Closing in, the wolf unexpectedly crouched submissively before him, allowing Cliff to carefully drape the scarf around its neck. The wolf said the scarf wasn't bad, and Cliff replied that he was truly glad. Then the majestic beast introduced itself as the divine beast Alberos and asked if they would grant its request. At first, Cliff agreed without hesitation. Lucille and Barney joined him in shock when they realized the divine creature was speaking like a human, which seemed impossible. The wolf then settled calmly in front of Barney's stroller and said it seemed they could understand its words because of the scarf he had made. Relieved that the translation device he made worked perfectly and that the wolf did not seem hostile, Barney was even more curious about the wolf's urgent request. At that moment, Lucille asked what had happened to the magnificent beast because it seemed to be in pain. Albero replied that it had come to take refuge after falling ill, had tragically lost mobility, and asked if they had a recovery potion at that time. Lucille immediately recognized it as a magical poison, and when Cliff asked for more about it, she told him it was a poison that contaminated the magical energy flowing through a body, and once contaminated, the body would gradually lose all mobility. She said magical poison could be natural, or a particular variant might already be present in the region. Cliff saw how serious it was, called it an emergency, and stressed that they had to get their father to report it to the Royal Magicians Guild right away. First, Lucille hugged the wool stick fur and cast a healing spell on it. Alberos was amazed to encounter such powerful magic, which immediately made him feel much better. Cliff was astonished to see that his sister could also wield healing magic. She admitted she could use it, but had not fully mastered it, saying she had learned it to some extent just in case something ever happened to their beloved family. Albero thanked her deeply for her timely help and humbly asked if there was anything it could do for her in return. Surprising everyone, she casually asked the magnificent beast if they would consider living with her family. Barney figured Lucille was smart, so there was probably a deeper reason for her hasty decision. His hopes fell apart when she cheerfully said she had always wanted a big dog. Cliff explained calmly that Alberos was never a dog and had its own will to decide its fate, while Alberos said without hesitation that it had long been deeply interested in human society. They hinted that it was willing to accept, then cautiously asked their parents for permission to bring Alberos into the family, and to their relief Scott and Dorothy did not seem reluctant. Dorothy also thought it would be great publicity for the workshop. Barney worried she might be planning to turn a divine beast into a mere mascot. It surprised him that Cliff had already nicknamed it Al. Scott said Barney had given Albero the magical scarf and had poured his heart and soul into making it to protect his older siblings. He thanked Barney warmly. They warmly welcomed Albera into their family, since no one opposed the arrangement, in return for its help in their time of need. From that moment on, Alberos vowed to protect them as cherished family. Over the years, their unique family grew, and they lived in harmony. Until each child vowed to set out on their own path to finally make their individual dreams come true. The scene shifted to a grand mansion, where a messenger told the distinguished Lord Zorian about a toxic magic outbreak first reported years earlier, saying that although the original cause had been addressed, the outbreak seemed to be happening again. He also asked whether Lord Zorian would allow the Royal Magic Corps to begin investigating the affected area. Early that morning, Scott told Barney and Alberos to rush a delivery, promising to reward him with a precious piece of magic ore. Determined, Barney immediately agreed and went to deliver the product with Alberos. Barney was clearly excited, especially because the reward was a magic ore. He said magical ore was essential for a magic tool engineer like him. Over the past few years, Barney had gradually come to understand how powerful magic tool engineers were. Magical ores made crafting and repairing many materials much easier, but specific conditions were required to create items with truly special properties. The first was recipes and levels. He had to unlock specific recipes that listed materials and methods, and they only became available based on job level. The second was the magic ore itself, used to give items special functions. The innate magic of these rare ores was essential, regardless of his current level. Mining had fallen sharply recently, so prices were climbing fast, making it very hard for him to obtain these vital ores. Pocket money was nice, but getting a substantial piece of magicor would be a long road, and Alberos said those were exactly the reasons Barney was recognized for his consistent diligence and hard work. Soon after, they reached their destinations and handed the product to its waiting owner. Barney thanked Alberos again for its invaluable help and asked whether it wanted to go to the diner, and it said it would have a hearty T-bone steak. When they entered the diner, a kind woman greeted them without missing a beat. They quickly ordered an omelet rice and a T-bone steak for themselves. From a quiet corner of the busy room, Dorothy peeked outside, smiled warmly, and waved to them. Albero said it was wonderful to see Dorothy feeling so much better. Although frail at first, she has been doing much better lately since becoming the vibrant star of Auntie's Diner. Barney noticed the whole family had grown noticeably livelier and happier since Alberos joined them, and he thought it might be a blessing from the divine beast. Cliff and his friend Petty arrived at the diner. When Cliff saw Barney, he asked if Barney had been helping their father with Alberos, and Barney said they had just finished their task. Petty greeted them with a warm smile as Cliff went to the counter to place their orders. Stepping forward, Barney apologized to her for disturbing what seemed to be a moment when she was finally alone with his brother, and her face went bright red when she heard him. When Cliff arrived, she blurted out that he was just a friend. Unaware of her feelings, Cliff's blunt confirmation crushed her hopes and left her visibly heartbroken. At 14, Cliff and Petty were active members of the same adventure party in Kajuru. Clear signs that a sweet young romance could bloom between them were present, but Cliff seemed unaware of most of it. Petty was the beloved daughter of the party's respected leader, Zach. Fond of both his daughter and Cliff, he had become almost a second father figure to him. Petty genuinely considered both Barney and Alberos cherished members of her family. He struck up a conversation with his brother Barney to see if they were heading out on a new quest. Cliff casually denied it and said they had just finished a routine herd gathering quest and were heading back to report to the guild. Petty spoke up immediately, telling them they would leave right away to gather magical ore. Cliff clamped his hand over her mouth, cutting her off mid-sentence. It was already far too late, and Barney wasn't naive enough to miss that crucial clue. Buying magical ore was expensive, but gathering it yourself cost nothing, though dangers lurked at every turn. Getting it would finally let Barney use his unlocked recipes and level up his skills. Before he could ask to tag along, Cliff refused without a second thought. Cliff said firmly that curiosity was fine, but Barney was still only 6 years old. He said that mining magical ore didn't always lead them into dungeons, but that didn't mean they wouldn't encounter dangerous monsters. Cliff had every reason to worry about his little brother, and he didn't want anything bad to happen to him. Immediately, Petty stepped in and calmed him down further, whispering to Barney that she would definitely help him. At that moment, she asked pointedly whether Cliff had forgotten the basic rules of KJRU. Any irregularities in the party's plan must be reported directly to the leader, and all matters will be judged by the leader's final decision. Even though it was guild protocol, Cliff argued that Barney wasn't even an adventure to begin with, in an unexpected turn of events. Dorothy arrived carrying their orders and smiling. Kunlai said it would be fine and told Cliff to look after his baby brother himself if he was really that worried. She also said Scott had once been a member of Zach's party. She was confident he would also give his permission. She held Barney's small hands firmly and gently asked if he could say how he felt, why he wanted magic so earnestly, and why he passionately wanted to grow into a magic tool engineer. Barney agreed right away, and Dorothy suggested they go to the guild together. Soon they reached the busy Adventurers Guild, and Barney was thrilled to see the lively hall because it was his first time inside. He slapped his cheeks firmly to remind himself this wasn't the time to be starry-eyed, and he needed to be noticed by the leader. Cliff led him to the inn where Kajaru was staying. He reassured Barney that feeling scared at first was normal and advised him to act as usual. Petty added that Zach had a tough exterior and came off like a gang leader, but she assured Barney he was actually soft-hearted and he still couldn't relax. Entering the inn, Barney fell silent at the imposing sight of Kajar's leaders. Petty casually said he seemed to worry too much, but Zach said that often the simplest things were the hardest. His attention shifted immediately to Barney. Saying he looked quite similar to Dorothy, Warney introduced himself hesitantly to Zach. Cliff told him they had a favor to ask. Zach gave Barney puzzled looks, while Petty said he'd scare him off if he acted that intimidating. Zach asked what he meant. Barney Bradley said he wanted to join Cliff and Petty on their magic or expedition, and asked to be allowed to tag along. Zach fixed him with a fierce stare and asked why. Terrified by his intimidating behavior, Barney summoned every ounce of courage. He explained his profession and said the quest was to gain magic so he could use it to create more of his unique inventions. He said he wanted to become an adult as soon as possible. Speaking from the heart, he said he wanted to protect his loving family, and everyone was surprised to hear his true feelings. Surprisingly, Zach patted his head and said he had passed the test. Barney's troubled expression soon turned to pure delight as he thanked him, while Zach, grinning knowingly, said Barney had now clearly proved why Scott always proudly called him his pride and joy. Because the party only had young children on such a dangerous quest, it felt unstable, so Zach called on another trusted gilded adventurer, Joseph. They told Joseph to come along, and although he seemed young, Zach personally trusted him and Joseph had the skills to keep the children safe. He smiled reassuringly, urged them to complete the quest successfully, and wished them a safe trip. Hours later, they reached home. They sat earnestly in front of their parents and pleaded with Scott to let Barney go on an adventure. Barney said he wanted to grow and improve his skills. Scott hesitated, noting there were monsters even on a simple gathering quest. Cliff said calmly that Scott could trust him, promising to protect Barney with all his strength if danger arose and to bring him home safely. Dorothy gently urged Scott to give their children more independence because they had grown up so much and so quickly. Scott was amazed at how much faster children grew than he had ever imagined. The next day they were all fully geared and ready to begin the adventure together. Scott gave Joseph his full trust and said he was counting on him, and Joseph promised to handle everything with care. Scott gave them a playful thump on the back and urged them on, instantly boosting their confidence. They rode through the forest in their carriage, while Joseph suggested they take a good rest, explaining it would take nearly 2 hours to reach Rodneo Valley, where the magical ore lay. Deeper in the dense forest, Barney asked about the off-limits area they were passing. Alberos said it looked like it was leading back to the very forest where they had first met, and the area that had been tainted by the magical poison. Joseph said the magic poison was first discovered in that forest 5 years ago, and the Royal Magic Corps spent about a year thoroughly investigating the area. Although the trade routes were now secure, most people still believed the forest and its lakes were tainted by the magic poison. When he heard the news, Barney told Alberos gently that the place felt a little lonely because it held so many of their cherished memories. After a while, they reached their destination and immediately began gathering the precious magic ore. When they reached the enchanting Rodney Valley, Barney was captivated by its stunning scenery. Joseph warned them that although monster numbers were usually low in the valley, formidable creatures sometimes appeared, so everyone should stay sharp and focused. Their first task was to scout for ore deposits, but Barney didn't waste any time and pulled out his latest invention. He pulled a mysterious round crystal ring from his pouch and proudly showed it to everyone. Cliff said he knew Barney was up to something crafty when Scott gave him permission the other night and asked about Barney's new, unique creation. Instead of telling them, Barney demonstrated his skills and let his work speak for itself. Extending his small arms, he caused a beam of light to shine in one direction, clearly indicating something important ahead. He revealed it was a magical tool designed to detect mana stones and point precisely to their locations. Barney wanted nothing more than to be truly helpful in the exploration. Impressed by his invention, Joseph decided to use the tool immediately for further investigation. Walking for some time, guided by the light, they finally came upon a rich ravine. The rugged landscape is studded with countless shimmering magical ores. Barney, on the other hand, felt both proud and relieved that carefully processing a magicka he picked up after an earlier errand had paid off. Joseph was amazed that he could make such useful tools. Barney modestly admitted the job had limits, but said that with the right materials anything was possible. Cliff proudly showed his sword and told Joseph Barney had made it, and Joseph said he might get one made for himself next time. The group stepped forward and rushed to gather those precious magic horrors without wasting another moment. United, they began harvesting the magic ores from the rugged landscape. As they gather large amounts of these resources, Joseph was amazed at how many ores he'd gathered in such a short time. He joked that with that miraculous ring, they could rival the Royal Academy's top detection mages without relying on those hard-to-master spells. Joseph suggested Barney could take any job using his remarkable magic tool, but Barney replied modestly that he doubted he could ever match his older sister's magical abilities. Intrigued, Joseph asked if he meant Lucille, whose tuition Cliff had partly paid, and Cliff was completely caught off guard, telling Joseph not to bring up such matters in front of them. Barney asks for clarification. Was Lucille not fully exempt from tuition? Asked Cliff to reveal that Lucille did have a scholarship, but it only covered part of her tuition, not the full amount. He said it was an amount he could afford, and he knew their father must have stretched himself thin for Lucille. Becoming a full-fledged adventurer as quickly as possible was necessary to help with the family's finances. However, when Barney asked him about achieving his personal dreams, Cliff assured him he truly dreamed of becoming the world's #1 adventurer. He said that simply imagining a future exploring places no one had reached, finding priceless treasures, and bravely rescuing people from fearsome monsters made his heart race. Moreover, caring deeply for his family, he was very happy to know he could truly help everyone. With pride, he claimed he would bring in big rewards and expand their workshop massively. Determined, Barney vowed to also become the capital's greatest magical tool engineer and support his beloved family. Cliff heard that heartfelt bow, hugged him tightly, and said he was really proud of his wonderful little brother. In that tender moment, Petty scanned the area and found discarded weapons smeared with blood, and she wondered why they were here. Joseph was told right away about those abandoned weapons, suggesting they likely belonged to adventurers who had faced terrifying monsters. Joseph warned they might not be alone and that something dangerous could still be nearby, so he urged them to leave quickly since they had already gathered a lot of the precious magicka. His expression darkened as he sensed an ominous presence approaching, and Alberos instinctively raised his defenses. Joseph quickly ordered everyone to hold their positions and stay on guard. Barney was left baffled and alarmed by their sudden, drastic change in behavior. Suddenly, a gigantic monster appeared and attacked with its massive fists, but they narrowly dodged the blow. They were left stunned by its sudden appearance, and its raw power sent shockwaves through the air as it tore the ground apart with its bare hands. Before it could strike again, Alberos seized Barney in its jaws and urged them to flee, but the other three stood firm and declared this was their territory. He reassured Alberos and told him to leave the matter to them. Then the three rushed at the beast. He landed a blow that wounded its massive body. The creature growled and quickly swiped its claws in self-defense. Joseph suddenly saw the wound they'd caused close up in an instant. After that, Cliff took the chance and lunged at it from behind, but the clever monster expected his move and quickly countered with a heavy punch that sent him flying across the field and slammed him into a nearby wall with immense force. When the beast fiercely kicked Petty and sent her hurtling across the ground, Joseph thought fast and threw a smoke bomb at it. Giving them just enough time to catch their breath, Joseph ordered the rest of the team to flee the scene immediately. Head to the capital to call for reinforcements, while he bravely held it off for now. Petty refused and insisted there was no way they would leave him behind and run. Joseph said firmly that the elder's duty was to protect the young, and that was exactly why Zack had brought him along. As the smoke began to clear, Joseph shouted and ordered them to flee. Barney knew Joseph was risking his life to help them escape, and his selfless efforts would be wasted if they stayed any longer. Abandoning their comrade was out of the question and would betray their bond. Before Barney could react, massive rocks came crashing down from the cliff. Albero appeared instantly and saved him from certain danger with incredible speed, noting the monster was clearly a strange breed and that even it would be overwhelmed while fighting to protect everyone. If they pressed Barney further about his crucial decision, whether he wanted to run or to stand his ground against the formidable enemy. At that moment, the crystal ring on his hand flared, its beam aimed straight at the recent rock slide, reacting strongly to something buried deep within the shattered rock. That blinding light made it clear that whatever it was no ordinary magic, or he thought it might be the great magicker, and that alone could break the terrifying deadlock. He immediately glanced at the discarded weapons, felt a surge of determination, and decided to go for it. Without hesitation, Albero leaped at the monstrous creature and bit its giant arm, while Barney urged Joseph to buy them 3 crucial minutes. Still unsure of his motive, Joseph suggested they run, but Barney pulled his hand away. Declaring his resolve, he said he still had the incredible power of his abilities as a magic tool engineer. He scolded Joseph for even thinking of abandoning them to face danger alone, insisting they'd all make it back together safe and alive. He urged him to keep unwavering faith in him. Joseph and the others were taken aback by his remarkably brave words. Joseph chuckled softly and remarked that the party would be pointless after all if he couldn't bring himself to trust his comrades. He also asked Barney to craft him a truly fine weapon when they returned to the capital. They then readied themselves to carry out their plan and hold the monster off for 3 minutes. Joseph added that he would show them how to rake in the cash. As Alberos fought the ferocious monster without his fur, Barney urgently asked them to buy him 3 crucial minutes so he could make a vital magic tool. Joseph agreed immediately and told Cliff and Petty to stay together and coordinate their attacks as soon as the enemy focused on him. Barney then called Albero back. As the divine beast sprang to his side, one turned to Joseph and urged him to trust his own abilities. The 3 readied themselves to face the monstrous beast. Barney asked Alberos to get the great magic ore from behind the shattered rock wall. He quickly gathered all the necessary iron materials. Meanwhile, Cliff thought, slightly frustrated. Although he lacked the power to fix their situation alone, he resented depending so much on his little brother as he attacked the beast fiercely. He couldn't help thinking he was pathetic, while St. Barney's was struggling so hard to protect everyone. Cliff decided not to hesitate and lunged at the monstrous creature again. He remembered training relentlessly for years to protect his family and inspire his younger brother. Determined not to let his cherished dream of becoming a great adventurer shatter at that critical moment, he vowed never to give up on his potential, no matter the circumstances. While Cliff pressed his relentless attack on the beast, Joseph said casually that acting alone would normally be a serious breach of discipline. Joseph and Petty never backed down and bravely faced the terrifying monster. By contrast, Barney carefully gathered all the necessary materials. Albero has provided him with an abundance of the great magicker. The bright light surprised Barney. Meanwhile, the beast's thunderous growl shook the earth, sending rocks flying as it advanced towards Cliff with its razor-sharp claws. Cliff stayed calm and bravely blocked the devastating attack with his sword. Joseph and Petty joined him, blocking the onslaught with their combined strength. Working together with sharp blades, they cut through its formidable claws, but the stubborn beast struck back with a massive swipe that sent them crashing to the ground. The monster's sly grin froze when it noticed Barney's sudden absence. Meanwhile, still injured, Cliff admitted defeat and said the chance everyone had worked together to create would not go to waste. After their timely intervention, Barney arrived with Alberos and unleashed a blinding beam of light that struck the beast with incredible force, leaving a massive, gaping hole in its chest as the monster thumps heavily to the ground. A huge explosion released a deadly cloud of toxic gas that quickly poisoned the air around them, and Joseph realized it was the magic poison, so he immediately told everyone to cover their mouths. Barney couldn't make sense of the commotion and he couldn't process anything further. Cliff sprang forward and hugged him immediately, tears of relief running down his face as he realized Barney was safe. Surprised by his brother's intense emotion, Barney suggested they go home together. Joseph couldn't understand how such a strange creature could release magical poison in a place that seemed relatively safe. Relieved, he wisely set his worries aside since everyone had survived, and that was enough for him. None of them noticed a strange, shadowy figure lurking behind them, quietly tracking their every move. The terrifying incident in Rodinho Valley was over, and the canyon leading to the forest was quickly sealed off with Zach's express permission. After the fight, Cliff and Barney arrived home bloodied and bruised. The parents' faces showed deep concern, but immense relief washed over them as they rushed to hug their children tightly. When the incident seemed over, Barney thought they could finally return to their peaceful daily lives, but fate had other plans for him. One pleasant, ordinary day, Barney went to his aunt's diner with Alberos, and his aunt greeted him with a warm smile and asked if he was there for another errand. About to help his father in the workshop, he glanced around the unusually quiet room and said it was quite empty for lunchtime. She revealed that since the incident with Barney's team in Rodinho Canyon, customer numbers had dropped and remained low for some time. Barney said most of the diner's customers were adventurers. The sudden closure of Rodinho Valley, where adventurers could safely mine magicka, had led many to relocate their bases away from the royal capital because trade dropped sharply, she remarked. She was worried that shops like hers, which relied on those resources and the visitors they drew, were struggling. Putting her complaints aside, she apologized for the gloomy talk and asked for his orders. Soon after they got home, Barney realized the royal capital was still actively investigating the magic poison. With its effects now spreading across the whole capital, it was clear this would not be an easy fix. As a magical tool engineer, he wondered if there was anything he could do to help keep adventurers in the capital. At that moment, he saw a huge crowd gathered in the distance and began to look closer. Scott called to him and asked for help calming the bustling crowd. The crowd immediately flocked to Barney, their faces full of enthusiasm as they asked him to make weapons for them. One of them said excitedly that Joseph of the Mirage had told him Barney's weapons were the best in the capital, and Barney was pleased to hear such praise. He immediately imagined his weapons becoming widely known among adventurers. That would likely bring many more people to the capital, specifically for his craftsmanship. Confident it would help grow Scott's workshop financially, he added with a resolute expression that he could contribute useful skills as a magical tool engineer. He reassured everyone and promised to take full responsibility for making weapons for each of them. Immediately after his heartfelt declaration, people began eagerly demanding weapons precisely tailored to their personal needs and attributes. The scene moved to the respected academy, where a figure with mysterious feet approached a scholar named Evans, asking whether he had been the one diligently studying magic poison. Evans said he had introduced himself as an ecology specialist and told the man he had been researching magic poison for many years. The man replied in an unsettling calm that the magic poison might have new effects, which genuinely surprised Evans. The man then asked whether he would be willing to cooperate with the experiments. With each passing day, the Rodinho Valley incident felt more distant, but things still weren't improving. Barney did only what he could. At the Adventurers Guild, he delivered the requested items. Greet Zach and Joseph at the same time. Zach gestured warmly and invited him to join them for a drink. Joseph noted that Barney's crafted weapons had built a strong reputation across the capital, and that Kadri was also growing popular with adventurers. Joseph sensed Barney's subtle unease. Someone kindly asked him what was bothering him. Barney sighed and said he'd noticed the capital's liveliness slowly fading, but they still had to keep pushing forward despite the challenges. After that unsettling incident, the number of adventurers in the capital steadily declined. That was the main reason for his deep concern. Zach, a bit annoyed, said Zorian was being overly dramatic and had no justifiable reason to ban the entries entirely. Barney asked if Zorian was the one who ordered the strict blockade, and Zach confirmed it. Zorian never liked adventurers who sold magicka on their own. He also said no one knew when the valley's seal would be lifted again, especially with the lingering magical toxins. It had been 5 years since the forest was sealed off, and people said the closure might continue for a long time. On top of that, Zorian had recently raised the tax his adventurers paid to the guild, showing his utter indifference to their profession. The capital would surely wither away at this rate. Alberos spoke with concern and asked whether Kedru would be all right amid these changes. Zach replied that their skills were solid, and their important ties to the monster hunting community and high-ranking contacts were still intact. With many newly recruited adventurers in the guild, easy jobs were getting harder to find. Barney wondered whether any new waves of adventurers were coming to the capital, because their options were limited, even for selling magical tools. At that moment, Joseph suggested they begin selling the powerful weapons Barney crafted earlier to defeat the ferocious monster in Rodneo Valley. Barney said it was difficult for him because the key material to make that magic tool was the great magic ore. The discovery was accidental, but the materials needed for mass production were far too rare to obtain consistently. He also pointed out that using almost all their energy on one shot wasn't practical for adventurers. Scott arrived just then and casually asked if Barney was still with them. Barney saw him and suggested they head back to the workshop together, and Scott agreed immediately. Zach went to see him and reassured him that he would always be welcome back in the guild if blacksmithing ever became too hard. Scott replied modestly that he was already retired. After a brief conversation, they said goodbye and went their separate ways. Later, while walking through the streets, Scott noticed Barney's thoughtful look and asked what was on his mind, and Barney explained he was thinking about how to spread magic tools beyond just adventures. Scott playfully ruffled his hair and remarked on his kindness, pointing out how clearly he cares for everyone else. When they got home, Scott found a letter in his mailbox and saw it was from the headmaster of an academy. It said the owner was very impressed by the fine workmanship of the staff his daughter used. They formally requested that staves be produced for general use at their school. Gulf, Barney, and Scott were also surprised by the demand for 50 such staves. They were pleased when the owner assured them the necessary materials, including the crucial magic ore, would be provided with the enclosed magic circle. At that moment, a radiant magic circle shimmered into being in the sky above. A bounty of enchanted magicor poured down, the dazzling sight filling them with great excitement. They moved forward on the request with unwavering determination. At the esteemed academy, Lucille enjoyed the beautiful day while having lunch with her friend. When Lucille unwrapped her sandwich, her friend asked whether it was the popular limited edition, and she said she had gone out of her way to get it. She confessed she really missed her home-cooked meals. A friend assured her she could visit her family soon because their summer break was coming up. Out of nowhere, a pigeon gracefully delivered a small rolled-up letter. Lucille's face brightened with pure joy the moment she read its delightful content. She revealed that the headmaster Regile had asked her father to make staves and that they would deliver them soon, which made it clear she would be seeing them very soon. She added that she was using the staff Scott had made during practice when the headmaster spoke to her. Regile praised the perfect stability of the magic it channeled, attributing it to the tool's exceptional quality, but Lucille never expected she would actually ask Scott himself for those very weapons. Gently she blessed the pigeon and released it. Lucille's friend, genuinely happy for her, was glad Lucille would finally see her family after a long time apart. A moment later, she told Lucille it was time for class, and they hurried to the East Wing for their ecology lesson. Walking through the corridors with the captured monsters beside them, the girl said she would never feel comfortable with those creatures on campus. Lucille agreed it was still nerve-wracking, even with powerful magic maintaining their control. Just then they saw a girl slowly walk up to the monsters and offer them medication while Jean stayed calm nearby. Lucille's friend warned that someone might bolt at any moment from sheer terror and added that the students carrying the monsters were from Mr. Evans' class. As they left, the monsters suddenly fought back, catching them completely off guard. Jean stayed calm and immediately used her magic to soothe the agitated creature. Lucille and her friend were both amazed by the display. Casting a calming spell without an incantation was truly impossible, yet Lucille said it did not feel like magic because she sensed no mana. It felt like they were communicating directly. Gina patted the monster affectionately, and the creature clearly enjoyed the attention. Meanwhile, Lucille watched, amazed by the child's extraordinary skills. Approaching Gina, she introduced herself as a magic studies student and gently asked about her unique skills. She also asked what Gina's name was. Gina hesitated as she introduced herself. After apologizing, she ran off at once. She left them wondering if she was just a shy girl. The scene shifted to the row capital at Scott's house, where everyone worked steadily on the commissioned weapons. They work around the clock to complete each piece with exceptional care. Shortly after, they finished all the weapons. Scott thanked Barney and Alberos for their invaluable assistance. They had to deliver the large shipment to the academy, and Scott said moving so much would be a major challenge. As usual, Barney already had a solution for that problem. Studying his material screen, he wondered if Scott had a large leather bag, a piece of metal, and some magic or fragments on hand. Scotland said the bag and metal were easy to get, and he still had a few fragments of the magic ore left from making the staff. Once confirmed, Arnie wasted no time, and with a flick of his wrist, he channeled his magic skillfully. Barney put the items into a surprisingly sturdy bag. Scott thought it looked ordinary, but he was astonished when Barney expertly stuffed the enormous weapons into the tiny bag. Barney proudly revealed a large-capacity magic bag, saying it could effortlessly carry anything larger. Scott lifted him up in delight, and Barney flailed, protesting that it was very embarrassing and that Scott was acting unusually like a child. Scott said proudly he was really glad Barney had come into his life, and that Barney was already a great magical tool engineer at such a young age. They decided to rest and deliver the goods the next day. Completely unaware of the looming danger, the one the Monstrogen had been tenderly caring for radiated a dark, ominous energy. The next day, under a clear sky, Scott arrived at the prestigious academy with Barney and Alberos. Warmly, he greeted the guard Will, a close friend for many years. Barney introduced him to his young son as his former esteemed colleague, staying polite. She greeted him tenderly, was greeted warmly in return, and introduced herself and Alberos. Will was surprised to find such a divine beast. He openly admitted he had never seen one before in his life. Then politely asked why Scott arrived, since his name was on the visitor list. Scott produced the official letter and said it had been requested directly by the headmistress. Skimming the letter, it was surprising to see that a former adventurer of his caliber had become such a skilled blacksmith. Then Barney asked what kind of adventurer his father really had been. The question genuinely surprised Scott and left him momentarily speechless, but we should proudly say he was a very promising adventurer, unlike his usual self, and everyone in the capital knew his name and remarkable achievements. He said he had retired because he felt he'd reached his limits and could not improve further as an adventurer, while Scott left adventuring to support his family by working 2 jobs. Barney grew even more curious. Eagerly, he asked exactly what his father had done for them, but Scott felt too embarrassed by those old memories to answer. Placing a supportive hand on Scott's shoulder and offering words of encouragement will boost his old friend's confidence. Scott suggested Barney meet Lucille while he personally delivered the staves to the headmaster. As they departed, he remained oblivious to the mysterious man lurking right behind him. Soon after, while crossing the Royal Academy's fields, Barney was surprised by how spacious it was. Albero asked if he had already talked to Lucille about their specific meeting spot. Barney said she had invited him to have lunch in the garden, and he decided to rely on the detailed map Lucille had thoughtfully included with her letter. Soon he noticed the students staring and realized they were deeply unsettled by a divine beast on the academy grounds. People in the capital knew Alberos well, but to everyone else the magnificent creature looked like a fearsome monster, so it was no surprise those outsiders stared at it oddly. Barney resented anyone who looked at his beloved Alberos with judgmental eyes. To lighten his mood, Albero affectionately licked his cheek and reassured him not to worry about such trivial matters. Across from them in the garden, Gina sat with a gloomy expression, thinking the other girls might really have wanted to be her friends, and she could not understand why she had foolishly run away like a coward. She assumed they'd seen her talking to a monster, but despite that unsettling sight, they still came over to talk to her. At that moment, Barney sat down beside Gina, Alberos padding softly at his side, and the gesture surprised her. She didn't know there were other people with abilities like hers. Immediately, she turned to Barney and asked whether he also had the rare gift of talking to creatures. In reply, he said he was only using a magical tool to interpret their words. He asked if she could communicate with monsters. She agreed, hesitating slightly, that it felt like a strange power, and said people had always called her a strange child for talking to animals. Barney said he thought it was a wonderful gift for her. His reassuring words visibly relieved her, and she explained she came from a remote countryside with no children her age, so she usually kept company by talking to animals. Gina admitted she really wanted to make friends at the academy, but when someone tried to talk to her recently, she became too scared to reply and instinctively ran away. Barney calmly pointed out that she had spoken to him without any visible fear of Alberos, and Furtish said he truly believed she was a kind person. His reassuring words left Gina stunned, and she said he reminded her of someone, but before she could say anything more, Lucille arrived at the scene and gently greeted her baby brother. Seeing Jean causes a sudden, startled reaction in a loose soul. Barney wondered to himself if the person she was talking about was his sister. Lucille then hugged Alberos warmly and said playfully that they were actually there during the incident in Rodinio Valley. Noticing Gina, she asked if she knew her brother. Gina replied that it was a coincidence. Barney seized the chance and invited Gina to join them for lunch. Sensing the moment, Alberos also gently encouraged her to join their small group. Soon after, Barney rummaged through his seemingly small bag for lunch, and Lucille said he had apparently brought nothing, but their doubt turned to surprise when he unexpectedly produced a massive basket. Lucille pulled treats and tasty dishes from the tiny bag, and realizing it was another of his inventions, complimented her trusty magical tool engineer. Seeing a real home-cooked meal after so long, Lucille was thrilled, and Barney told her that Dorothy had asked her to eat her fill and take good care of herself. While they talked, Lucille learned that Professor Evans had personally asked Gina to look after the monsters held at the academy. Gina said the professor believed her special speaking power would be very useful for handling them. Barney was surprised the prestigious Royal Academy kept such monsters caged, and he asked if they were sure those creatures would not suddenly go on a rampage. Gina assured them the monsters were securely bound with special magic, and that they were mostly given calming and disease-preventing medicines. Lucille said they were not just raising those monsters. The Academy was also carrying out several important research projects, and in that garden, they were growing anesthetic herbs for vital pharmacological research. Across the Academy, Rajal was pleased to receive such splendid stays. She admitted she would depend heavily on Scott's inventions going forward. She declared proudly that Lucille's academic achievements were truly remarkable and deserved recognition. She told him Lucille was academically excellent, always excelling in her studies, and had recently broken the record for consecutive wins in mock battles, receiving a generous award. Rajal stressed that it was the direct result of her unwavering hard work, not just because she relied on her talent as a great mage. Scott Bean felt proud when he heard about his daughter's impressive accomplishments. Rajal reassured him that Lucille was truly in capable, trusted hands at the academy. As Scott exited the room, the same shady figure appeared right in front of him with a cunning smirk as he began drawing a magic circle to block the headmaster's office. He asked if he'd kept Scott waiting for long. Scott stayed unfazed and sternly demanded that the figure reveal his true identity. However, the man declined to reveal it, saying he did not want to trouble the headmaster with his presence. Casually calling out Scott's and Barney's names, he prompted Scott to ask how he knew their names. The magic circle flared as the figure said Scott's son had recently disrupted his plan. At that moment, a giant, ominous crystal formed, sparking a wild energy in the creatures that had been captivated. At that moment, the Academy's monsters violently broke free from their restraints, smashed through their cells, and began attacking every student in sight, drawing Barney and the others' attention. At first, they couldn't understand why the students were running so frantically. Lucille quickly realized they were fleeing the monster breeding facility, while Gina stared in disbelief as the monsters went on a rampage. The creatures she had tenderly cared for over several days kept destroying the area with terrifying force. Gina shrieked, alarmed by their odd behavior and the poison magic radiating from them. Lucille knew she could not afford to hesitate. She drew her staff immediately, aimed it at the ferocious beasts, and prepared to attack. Gina stepped in and said she would stop them, but as she cast her spell, that barely affected the enraged monsters, and when a monstrous beast lunged at Gina, Lucille sprang in with lightning-fast reflexes and saved Gina from its powerful assault. She immediately cast her frostbite spell on monster, but before she could continue, Janet grabbed her sleeves in desperation. In tears, she said those monsters weren't really bad, apologized for not taking proper care of them, and begged Lucille not to kill them. Lucille hesitated for a moment, and her resolve began to waver. Meanwhile, a fearsome beast closed in on another terrified student, preparing to attack. Alberos charged in bravely and bit down hard on its giant horns, sending it flying across the field, and shouting for the student to run to safety. As he guided the students out, Barney wondered if he could calm the enraged creatures instead of permanently harming them. When the monster attacked Lucille and Gina, Lucille immediately raised a powerful energy shield to protect them. Constant movement to keep that guard exhausted her, and she wanted to use her healing powers too. Barney thought that if he could paralyze them, even for a moment, Lucille could use her healing magic. At that moment, a brilliant idea came to him. He told her he would build a tool to stop the monsters and asked her to hold them off a little longer. He also remarked that he had learned the true strength of teamwork in Rodinio Valley. He suggested they combine their powers to overcome the immediate threat. Barney immediately ordered Alberos to take him to the place Lucille had said the anesthetic herbs were kept. He saw injured students along the way. He recognized the urgent need to act quickly. Soon after, he arrived at her garden and found the anesthetic herb right in front of him. In addition, he needed a protective magic stone to craft the tool. Albero then said he would go rescue the other students and asked if Barney could manage alone there. Barney replied he would finish quickly and join them. At exactly the right moment, Albero arrived at the chaotic scene and quickly rescued the terrified students from the monster's relentless attacks. The divine beast lunged at the maddened creatures and bit into their thick skin with its razor-sharp fangs. Another monstrous beast lunged forward and slammed into Alberos with its powerful horns. Something ripped into its side, causing it to bleed. Stunned by the sudden injury, the students considered whether fleeing was a good idea. They soon exchanged resolute glances. They courageously aided Alberos and protected it with their own powers. All the students regained their confidence and came together to help Alberos in. They defend against rampaging monsters and protect their prestigious academy. Albero remained genuinely taken aback by their unexpected determination. On the other hand, Scott confronted that shady individual as he heard the escalating commotion outside. He demanded to know what the madman had done, and the figure replied calmly that it was only an experiment and that he would not let Scott or the headmaster interfere with his grand plans without wasting another second. Drawing a magic circle, he cast dark, binding magic on Scott, leaving him completely immobile. He added that Scott seemed to be a close combat fighter, which did not suit his magic. A cunning grin crossed his face as he said that even a once famous adventurer had fallen so easily to his magic, saving him time and a lot of effort. Smugness drained from his face when he realized Scott had effortlessly broken free from his magic. At that instant, Scott slipped out from behind and pressed his dagger to the man's neck, saying that although it was only a short exploration dagger for self-defense, it could easily slice his head clean off. He demanded to know his true purpose and what torments he had inflicted on those innocent students. The man stood speechless, wondering how Scott had managed to evade his magic with only brute strength. A flick of his hand freed him from Scott's hold, and immediately he cast an attack spell aimed at Scott. Scott was stunned that the man was unharmed, even after casting an attack spell on himself. The man launched another attack, saying arrogantly that he only needed to outpace Scott if he was going to rely solely on speed. When Scott tried to land his attack, the man stayed unharmed and said with a mocking grin that all his attempts were futile. The man spoke another incantation and launched a powerful explosive attack at Scott, sending him crashing into a nearby wall. He taunted that a former adventurer like Scott could not beat him and that Scott would just give up and stay silent. At that moment, a vivid image of his beloved family flashed into his mind, and with a determined flick of his hand, he said firmly that he was a retired adventurer. As a blacksmith, he would do anything to protect his beloved family. At that instant, a flurry of knives hovered above the man's head, catching him completely off guard and striking immediately, but he narrowly evaded the precise attack. Regaining his footing quickly, Scott suddenly appeared directly behind the man and noticed a distinct symbol on the back of his cape. At the same time, the students struggled to keep up with those formidable monsters. At that exact moment, Barney arrived with his newly crafted anesthetic crossbow and fired a barrage of arrows at the enraged beasts. Calms them quickly and puts them to sleep immediately. Barney had crafted that remarkable tool using only anesthetic curves, magic stones, bench wood, and iron. He turned to Lucille and saw she had reached her limit. He quickly ordered them to get down. He then took careful aim at a particularly large monster. He fired his arrow with calculated precision. The anesthetic barely affected that monster, and it recovered almost immediately. He couldn't make sense of what was happening. Surprisingly, Professor Evans asked why those monsters were going berserk from the magic poison. Gina quickly said she had given them the medicines he had asked for, and he quivered when he heard her. He protested that the magic poison he gave was supposed to calm and prevent disease, just as the mysterious man had claimed. Evans mentioning the man made Barney immediately suspicious, and Gina couldn't believe the creatures were acting that way because of the medicine she had given them. Tears fill her eyes as she blames herself for the disturbance spreading through the academy and begins to break down. Lucille suggested she look around. Pointing out that everyone was doing everything they could to ease the chaos, he asked whether she would give up so easily. Firmly, she told Gina to pull herself together and help her save the students fighting for their lives. Turning to Barney, she ordered him to attack again to open a chance for a crucial healing spell as Gina regained her composure. She resolved to save every student connected to her and help Lucille during the chaos. At that moment, she grasped the staff with Lucille and began to cast her spell. Jan made one last desperate attempt to reach the tormented monsters. Lucille instructed Barney to sedate them again on her precise signal. Gina reached into the beast's chaotic mind to calm its fury. She promised she would no longer let it suffer. Her heartfelt attempts failed because the magic poison blocked her voice from reaching its consciousness. Lucille felt a little calmer after her brother's timely intervention, but it was still far too dangerous to let her guard drop for even a moment. For her healing magic to work best, she had to get much closer to the rampaging beast. Lucille had never tried to maintain a power guard while casting a double healing spell. She wasn't sure she could pull it off on her first try, and even if she did, the healing would probably be much weaker than usual. That was the only way she could think of in that critical moment. At that pivotal moment, Gina promised to trust her completely, just as Lucille had trusted Gina. Determined to end the chaos, she quickly reinforced her defenses and raised her guard. Prompted further, Barney wasted no time and expertly fired a flurry of anesthetic arrows at it. Lucille focused deeply as she activated her healing power. This instantly intensified the sedative effects of the anesthetic arrows. At the same time, Gina used her powers and tried again to communicate with the distressed creature. Apologizing, she said she never meant to cause it such unbearable pain. She said she had no friends during that isolated period, but that isolation made her school life less harsh. When the beast slowly began to regain its senses, Gina promised to help them all again once the chaos was over. She stressed that all of them were deeply precious to her. Lucille said she had been there for her then, and Gina smiled gratefully. Together they promised their combined magic will save everyone. The beast's once fierce behavior immediately softened. A powerful body relaxes and finally collapses unconscious onto the ground. Gina leaped at it without hesitation and held it in a tight, comforting embrace, while Barney joined Lucille and exchanged a victorious high-five. Scott stayed locked in fierce combat with the mysterious man, who launched another surprise attack that Scott dodged. He kept up relentless attacks with his swift dagger, but the man remained remarkably unscathed. He immediately pulled off his hood and said Scott was quite resilient but equally annoying. Sighing heavily, he admitted he hadn't planned to go all out against him, but circumstances had forced them to this point, and a quick snap of his fingers formed a dark, unsettling magic circle. A large burst of ominous energy erupted, forming a towering, monstrous shadow behind the man, and Scott scoffed at the remark, saying anything less than this challenge would not be worth his time. Without warning, the wall directly behind the mysterious man split open with a shattering crash. A powerful hand shot out from the fractured opening and quickly cast an enhanced restraint, a power chain that instantly trapped the man in the towering shadow behind him, leaving him with a frustrated frown. The man said this was exactly why he had wanted to lock away the Academy's esteemed headmaster. Regil said in a firm voice that the man clearly had a knack for messing up other people's institutions. To everyone's surprise, the man's form began to dissolve into nothingness as he gave a sinister grin and said he had gathered enough results. Before Scott could do anything else, the man vanished completely, mockingly bidding him farewell. On the campus, the chaos was finally under control. Professor Evans, shoulders slumped with guilt, apologized to them, convinced it was his fault. Gina suggested the drugs they had been given might be the cause. Multiple doses likely drove the creatures berserk. Evans confirmed that was the main cause, though it remained unclear whether other factors also contributed to the rampage. Lucille demanded how he had obtained those medications, and he said a hooded man had approached them earlier to test a tranquilizer made with magical poison on the monsters they bred at the Academy. As the person in charge of the monsters, he couldn't allow unfamiliar substances to be given without proper evaluation. The man had handed him an official government approval document that appeared to show the drug's supposed calming and disease-preventing effects. He reached for the letter to show the king's signature. It exploded violently and caught fire, leaving everyone stunned and in disbelief. Lucille said at once that the man seemed to have used magic to expertly hide every trace of evidence. When Barney asked for more details about him, Evans said he had never revealed his identity or affiliation, and that a state approval document was not something an ordinary person could obtain, which only emphasized that he might be a high-ranking government official or connected to such powerful institutions. With that crucial proof reduced to ashes, no definite evidence remained, At that moment, Scott arrived with Regile. He suddenly came back with the man's discarded cloth. Seeing him hurt, Lucille hurried to her father, deeply concerned, and asked how he was. He said a mysterious man had attacked the headmaster's office and was probably the same person who sold those medications to Evans. He added that he had glimpsed a distinct symbol on the man's discarded cloth, and Barney questioned him about it. Scott said it was the emblem of the Kingdom Magic Defense Corps. Regile said the academy had suffered severe, undeniable damage, even if Evans meant no harm. Firmly, she said she could not condone his unilateral actions and that the matter would be discussed with others to decide how to handle his involvement. Evans bowed deeply before her and said he would take full responsibility for the consequences. As everyone began to leave, Scott called Barney over in a serious voice. Telling his son the culprit clearly knew about them and the troubling Rodo Valley incident, he then asked if Barney had come across anyone suspicious on his recent travels, and Barney said he had not, prompting Scott to say they should move on for now. As he left, Barney considered the frightening possibility that the monstrous creature in the Rodo Valley might not be a natural occurrence. It was a creature summoned and unleashed by that same man. He couldn't understand why it would deliberately harm his friends and family. He remained certain that this dangerous enemy would strike again. Determined, he set out to become stronger in the meantime, to stand as a guardian, shielding his loved ones from any looming threat. Soon after, in Regile's office, everyone who had been at the outbreak briefed the headmaster on their key findings. After their discussion, she concluded that the attacker and the man who offered the drug were likely the same person. After seeing his power firsthand, she suspected he might be part of the kingdom's elite magic corps and that he could represent a force capable of rivaling their own. Scott said with a troubled look that it could be far worse than they had first imagined. Regile decided to end the meeting for now, but she firmly assured them that the academy would secretly continue its thorough investigation as everyone began to leave. Gently reaching out to Barney, she asked if they could speak privately for a moment. Scott said he would wait outside patiently while they sat comfortably on the couch. She apologized for cutting him off earlier. He immediately mentioned his weapons, which had proved effective at calming the rampaging monsters in the academy. Barney humbly admitted he did not rely on his powers alone and that he had borrowed some essential materials from the academy to create that magic tool. Regile politely asked whether he would be willing to show her the unique magic tool. When he took it from his small pouch, she studied the weapon closely. She also praised his bravery and said he had clearly inherited exceptional talent. The specialized role of a magical tool engineer was extremely rare in that country. That weapon could usually be made only by a highly trained magician. Few people had ever reached that level of skill, and little was known about them. Only now, after hearing it from the headmaster herself, Barney realized he was doing something remarkable and that his chosen job held immense power. Regile also told him that, although the academy usually prioritized magic and martial jobs, no students were currently enrolled in crafting. To help the academy grow, she said she genuinely wanted to learn more about the magical tool engineer profession. Because Barney was the only magical tool engineer she knew, she asked him earnestly to consider the Royal Academy for his future studies. Barney's eyes widened in astonishment at her unexpected request, and he protested that he was only 6 and didn't really understand magic. Seeing his resistance, Regile took on a chilling expression and spoke in a cold tone. She pointed out that it seemed he could use the academy's expensive anesthetic grass in various custom benches without permission, and her sudden change in behavior immediately changed his response, and he has not said he will consider her proposal. Barney stepped out of the building and was surprised by Regile's sudden change in behavior. Only he knew his power alone could not solve every challenge. Seeing the courtyard's huge mess, he was stunned. Scott, who was at the scene, thought they could fix many things together using his blacksmithing skills and Barney's exceptional repair abilities. Determined, Scott and Barney worked together to repair the damage. The entire student body rallied to support their effort. Fortunately, Will was perfectly fine, suffering only a fractured bone that Lucille immediately tried to heal with her magic. Barney saw a student motioning him over, urgently asking for help to fix a badly damaged part of the building. Barney went straight to work and with effortless skill, repaired the section with his magic in seconds, and then another group of students approached, their faces full of gratitude. They bowed deeply before Alberos and thanked it for bravely saving their lives. Alberos calmly dismissed their praise. He said with quiet dignity that nothing was more important than helping each other in times of need. One student said watching the divine beast helped them so diligently made them realize whether someone is a friend or a foe should not be judged by outward appearance, but by their inner feelings and actions. They vowed firmly to get better and grow much stronger, like Alberos, who could save others without hesitation. Barney felt proud that Alberos was finally getting the recognition it deserved. On another corner of the academy grounds, Lucille gracefully slipped behind Gina, who was diligently sweeping around the academy. Gina asked if she was done with the gatekeeper, and Lucille immediately agreed and offered to help with the cleanup. Lucille asked what would happen to the monsters Jin had tenderly cared for, and Jin said Regile had allowed her to keep caring for them. They had advised that they needed to tighten their restraints temporarily until the chaotic situation was completely under control. Lucille said it could be some time before things get back to normal, and that she really wanted to care for the creatures with Gina and become true friends with them. At that moment, her friends arrived. They pulled her into a tight hug, said they were relieved she was safe and unharmed, admitted they had been scared watching her fight the monsters from afar, and praised her courage and powerful magic. Lucille replied modestly that their success came from everyone working together. To their surprise, they turned to Gina and praised her unique powers as well. Karen and Melissa introduced themselves and warmly asked if she would like to be their friend too. Beaming, Gina immediately agreed and shook their hands, while Lucille watched with a warm, contented smile. That evening at the academy's main exit, everyone gathered to say a heartfelt goodbye to Scott and Barney. On the way back in the carriage, Scott asked if the headmaster planned to admit Barney to the prestigious academy, and Barney confirmed it. He admitted that even though Regile had praised his skill so highly, the recent event made him realize he still desperately needed to strengthen his own ability. The magic tool's power was enough, but it hadn't fully affected the most formidable monster, and Barney thought it was because he lacked skill. Scott knew he needed to get stronger. He was certain he could not risk the enemy escaping again. His movements were visibly less agile than in his prime. Determined to settle the score with that cunning man himself, he planned to do it the next time their paths crossed. He then told Barney about Stone, a secluded village deep in the verdant Dagon region. Someone in that village had kindly looked after him when he first started adventuring. A nearby mine held abundant magic stones. He said he planned to go there soon for training and asked if Barney would like to join him. Barney was thrilled to hear the offer. He asked eagerly whether he would truly be okay with him tagging along. Meanwhile, Scott thought carefully about his original intention. He will protect his beloved family from any danger, no matter the circumstances. At the academy, Regile urgently informed Lord Matthews, a trusted member of the royal family, about the recent unsettling incident. She revealed suspicions that vital documents had been forged and that the kingdom's magic core was involved. She had come to him in person to deliver this critical report. She asked him directly whether he had any idea about these incidents, but he flatly denied knowing and immediately turned the conversation to Barney. Zorian arrived and casually said he might have overheard some very unsettling rumors. After the Zorians arrived, Matthias got straight to the point. Someone asked him if he knew about the serious situation that had just unfolded at the Royal Magic Academy. Zorian replied by refuting the claim. He admitted he could not stay silent about the involvement of the kingdom's magic core and the forged documents, since he was ultimately in charge of such sensitive matters, and he announced they would immediately launch a thorough investigation at the academy as well. Acting on the direct orders of the next king, Prince Baker. Then he flashed a sly grin and asked if Matthias would be completely okay with this investigation. Matthias quickly gathered his subtle unease and gave him the necessary permission. He smoothly asked Zorian to tell his brother he would be stepping out briefly. Someone very important needed to meet him right away. A few days later, Barney and Scott arrived at the village mentioned, and Barney's heart raced as he leaped to his feet, saying he could clearly see the massive mine coming into view. Scott told him Stone Village is quite small now, but it used to be bustling thanks to a rich magic ore mine nearby. With the unsettling school incident finally over, Scott brought Barney to that same village to collect more magic ore, leaving Barney eager to explore the area. He remembered asking Dorothy for permission for this trip back then. She said confidently that Scott's main reason for visiting the village was to meet a particular person. Barney suspected Scott had another purpose, sensing something subtle in the air. Alberos, also traveling with them, told Scott that the nearby forest seemed linked to the woods they had passed through before and asked if that was really all right. Scott said the forest around the village was sealed off, but he cautioned it should be safe if they kept their distance and stayed on guard. Shortly after, they reached the outskirts of Stone Village. Brimming with enthusiasm, Barney was eager to explore the quiet village, while Scott wisely suggested they greet the village's chief first. As they moved deeper into the village, Barney couldn't shake the feeling that almost nobody was around. Albero also said it didn't look very lively at all. At that moment, they came upon a small group of men gathered in the center. Barney swooped in without thinking, but their intense, wary reaction surprised him. They bombarded him with strange questions, probing his identity and asking what he wanted from them. However, Scott arrived casually and calmly disclosed the news. Their purpose was simply to visit the sales chief and ask whether he knew where he was. Zelv, standing nearby, immediately recognized Scott and asked whether this was the same Scott he'd known. When Scott greeted him warmly, Zill went straight over and told him he seemed much tougher than the last time they met, apologized for the crowd's earlier rudeness, and invited them into his home. After settling into Zella's house, he asked how Scott was doing overall. In response, Scott said he had quit adventuring and now proudly ran a blacksmith shop in the capital. As Zell turned his gaze to Barney and Alberos, he asked how they were related to him. Scott introduced them as his beloved son and his magnificent divine beast, and Zell was surprised because he could not believe the Scott he knew had become a father. Adding to his astonishment, Scott then revealed that Barney was his second son and also mentioned his older son and daughter. Then he formally introduced Zill to Barney as the village chief and his respected master. It also said Zells was a highly skilled warrior who excelled at attack magic. Barney was thrilled when he finally met his father's legendary master. Zill thanked them warmly for coming to his humble village and admitted he would have entertained them better if not for the village's unfortunate mess. After hearing him, Scott asked how the village was doing. It looked different and undeniably gloomier than before. Zales told him that 5 years earlier, the nearby Dagon mine had suffered a major collapse. Miraculously, there were no fatalities, but many people were badly injured. The mine was quickly sealed off, and when vital trade was abruptly cut off, many residents abandoned the village. Hearing that, Marnie turned to Alberos and said it was exactly the time they had first met in that forest. The mine was connected to that forest, and Barney's expression thickened as he realized the timing of both incidents might not be a coincidence. Zeal added that the remaining villagers were understandably on edge because of the circumstances, so he earnestly asked Scott to forgive their earlier rudeness. At that moment, a woman using a crutch for her injured foot came over and offered them some tea. When she returned, Scott asked if she had been injured in the mine collapse, but Zell denied it, saying he had only just found her collapsed near the forest and had let her stay at his house because she had nowhere else to go. He lamented that if they could restore the village buildings and get proper equipment, they could then invite a much-needed doctor to the village. Both Barney and Scott shared a knowing glance before Barney. He sprang up with enthusiastic energy and offered to fix the entire village himself. Without another word, he ran out of the house at once, determined to repair all the damages. He repaired the village's broken things one by one and even cheerfully fixed the playground equipment when the children asked him. After watching Barney's impressive display of skills, Zeld was impressed at how easily and efficiently he fixed things. The village was relieved since it had so few skilled workers. Turning to Scott, he said he clearly had an eye for talent, then got straight to the point. He said he fully understood Scott hadn't come there just to exchange simple greetings. Scott stopped hiding his true intentions and asked Sills to train him again, formally calling him his master. Zeal's question explained the reason for his abrupt decision to resume training. Scott said he never regretted quitting adventuring, and there were certain things only a skilled blacksmith like him could accomplish. At his current strength, he couldn't fully protect the family he loved. Now he realized he urgently needed to become stronger than he had been in his adventuring days. Luckily, his kids had grown into strong, resilient people, bravely pursuing their dreams. As their father, he was responsible for protecting them from every looming threat. Bowing deeply to Zeals, he begged him to train him again. Zeal placed a firm hand on Scott's shoulder and said in a gentle, almost proud voice that he had truly become quite the father while he wasn't watching. Now he felt he had to repay the great kindness he had received from his beloved son. Zill pointed his stick at him and said he would train him on one condition, reminding Scott that the training was relentless and demanded absolute dedication. Zells chuckled and said that if Scott really wanted to go for it, he'd have him in top shape in no time. With a thoughtful smile, he approached the injured woman, and she asked why he had arrived so suddenly. He gently pointed out her visible injuries. She said she was injured in the mine collapse. Fortunately, she was now recovering because the villagers had been very kind to her. Barney rummaged through his small bag for the leftover magical ore from when he crafted the staff. He revealed a sincere plan to build a specialized tool to directly help her heal. He quickly asked her to sit in a nearby chair. With precise focus, he prepared all the necessary materials. He drew on his magic and carefully fashioned a tool tailored to her needs. Using those materials, he made a device like a traditional cast. She claimed wearing it would double her healing power. Although not as strong as direct healing magic, Barney said it would definitely speed her recovery. She thanked him for his invaluable help, and Barney insisted she let him carefully apply the device to her leg as he gently unwrapped those old bandages. A mysterious tattoo was visible on her leg, but he paid it little mind since he was focused on using the tool. She thanked him again and admitted she had no money to repay him. Barney gently dismissed her concern and said he was simply glad his skills could help someone in need. At that moment she asked why he had come to the village, but before he could reply, Scott knocked on the door and called them out. Bowing respectfully to her, Barney took his leave, completely unaware that something about her was eerie and unsettling. Meanwhile, Barney went outside and immediately asked if anyone needed help. Scott told him there was a food storage on the outskirts of the village and asked if Barney could help carry some food. Barney agreed immediately, while Zell apologized for the trouble. Although the village buildings were falling apart, they had at least managed to significantly improve their food supplies recently. He told them the Dragon Region's lord had changed recently, and they urgently needed to secure the village's food supply. Scott wondered if the new lord was someone important. This confirms that Zell was trustworthy and always put his people's well-being first. He told Scott the person was out on an inspection tour and suggested they greet him when he returned. A loud commotion passed through the quiet village, and everyone heard it. Running toward the source, they found a severely injured, blood-soaked soldier. Someone collapsed to the ground right in front of them. Everyone immediately rushed to the injured soldier. Given his severe wounds and the distance he had covered, he assumed the rest of his party could not be far. On second thought, Zill decided to move forward to rescue the others and quickly asked the nearby women to care for the collapsed soldier's injuries. After studying the area, Scott suggested they split up to search and have Alberos track the blood scent, but Zell's refused. Already knowing roughly where to look, and with Zell firmly in command, they immediately rushed toward the suspected scene. He said it must be Lord Ryasu's retinue, a clear sign that something very bad had happened during their inspection. Shortly after, an overturned carriage lay broken in front of them. Zell's was now completely sure it was the Lord's carriage and that they had been attacked after all. Albero's keen senses instinctively warned everyone to stay on guard. Arriving at the chaotic scene, the smell of human blood grew stronger in the air. They came upon exhausted soldiers, desperately fighting a massive ferocious boar with only their meager swords, the boar's fierce gaze fixed on them. It lunged at them instantly at lightning speed. Reacting swiftly, Scott lunged at the monster with his trusted dagger and struck its vital spot with a strong, precise blow, leaving it immobile for a few crucial seconds. Everyone was stunned by his remarkable power and bravery, while Zeal, eyes wide with surprise, said it was an incredibly precise strike to the critical spot. To their surprise, the boar quickly regained consciousness, proving it was no ordinary monster. The monstrous creature regained its footing and let out a thunderous growl that echoed through the dense forest. Unexpectedly, an arrow struck and pierced its thick skull. Barney emerged as the skilled marksman, deeply hoping his upgraded crossbow would work this time. Astonished, they watched the boar stumble and collapse to the ground, and Barney emerged victorious again through his skill and ability. Unexpectedly, Lord Matthew arrived with his aide Ranber and immediately praised Barney's remarkable display of power and precision. When Zill saw him, he visibly relaxed, relieved that Matthews had made it out safely. Matthews said they were attacked on their way back from the inspection. He said the escort was minimal, so the situation was dire. He could hardly believe Barney was truly as powerful as the rumors claimed, and Barney was entirely unaware of the discussions about his reputation. Matthews said he had heard about Barney's impressive victory in the Rodinio Valley and the recent incident at the Royal Academy. Extending his hand with a warm smile, he said he never expected them to run into each other like this. Barney shook his hand and politely asked the man's identity, and Zell stepped forward and said he was the esteemed Lord of Stone Village, Lord Matthias. Matthews then revealed a surprising truth. He was the second prince of the Raltuba Kingdom, a revelation that shocked both Scott and Barney. Soon after, an escort led Scott and Barney to the grand mansion where Matthew lived, and as Barney moved through the corridors, he reflected. He had never realized such an impressive place existed on the village outskirts, and he thought it unsuitable for a prince of his rank to stay in such a secluded, somewhat unreliable location. Matthews again thanked them both for saving him from a dangerous situation. Scott immediately offered to help, telling the prince to ask if he needed help with his soldiers. Mathias thanked him again and said he had already entrusted that matter to Zeals. Barney watched the prince respond with humility, realizing he had expected someone more imposing, but was pleasantly surprised by the prince's kindness. At that moment, Scott asked why he had brought them into his mansion. In response, Mathias said he sincerely wanted their cooperation. He added that several important reasons explained why he served as the Lord of Stone Village. Suspicious figures kept entering and leaving the forest by the village, an area the kingdom's magic unit closely managed, and he was monitoring them as part of his own investigation. He said it was nearly impossible for ordinary civilians to enter the magic unit's restricted area, which strongly suggested the information about the trespassers was true. The initial investigation into the forest, where the magical poison first mysteriously appeared, lasted 5 years but remained unsolved, and recent reports named magic unit members in the unsettling academy incident. Matthews said his life was directly threatened when he went to investigate the forest himself. His aide stepped in and said the unusually large monster that appeared in Rodneo Valley shouldn't exist there naturally. Given the worrying reports of mutated monsters at the academy and the direct attack on His Highness that same day, their deep suspicions have become certainty. It was likely the magic unit that summoned those large monsters. Mathias realized their immediate goal was to protect the ominous secrets hidden in the forest. The monstrous creatures from Rodineo Valley and the recent academic incident were probably just horrific experimental subjects, and Matthews had carefully connected the dots. Now fully realizing these incidents were connected, Barney was stunned and demanded to know how the magic unit could commit such horrible acts even against a prince. Mathias also told them that, although the ultimate target was uncertain, the Mastermind was clearly in the heart of the kingdom, someone able to control the powerful magic unit. Many members of the royal family were clearly unhappy. This was exactly why he sought Barney's magical tools, whose unique power had solved both earlier incidents. Hearing his earnest plea, Barney doubted he was fit to handle matters that could decide the nation's fate. Mathias pressed on, stressing that Barney was said to be the only craftsman of magical tools in the country. It felt absolutely crucial, so he urgently needed Barney's help. Approaching Barney, he said he could not accept anything that shook the kingdom's foundations, and that he would do whatever it took to secure lasting peace for his people. Placing a gentle, hopeful hand on Barney's shoulder, he earnestly asked for his crucial help in protecting those precious people. Barney thought deeply that he was born to be a magical tool engineer, and that only he could truly do some things. Many trustworthy comrades surrounded him, but his family mattered most, and if his power could protect them, he was determined to help. It mattered especially because he couldn't do anything in his past life. Firmly grasping Matthew's hand, he agreed to the daring plan. Scott offered to help him. Matthew knelt before them and thanked them sincerely for their invaluable help. He then wanted to determine their next critical steps. He said he wanted to reinforce their troops a bit more and planned to return to the capital to reorganize things cautiously. Barney quickly told him there were indeed reliable people in the capital, who he could trust completely with such matters. By contrast, the woman who had been cleverly faking her injury strode purposefully into the deep forest on her own 2 feet, cast a spell to summon an ominous crow, and quickly attached a note to its leg. Then released it into the dark sky.